Hola, I'm Kiru Paul, and this is Linda. And just to review, in the last lesson, I taught you my absolute favorite cognate trick to change English words ending in tion into Spanish words that end in cion. Now, the reason it's my favorite cognate trick is not just because you can convert hundreds of English nouns into Spanish nouns. It's because you can take a lot of those Spanish nouns and then change them into verbs. Remember, those are action words. Today's lesson is really going to propel your Spanish. We're going to be building on what you should have already learned in Lesson 2. So if you haven't already watched that video or you don't quite understand those concepts, you need to go back and do that one first. All right, let's get started. First of all, we want to take a word in English that ends in tion so we can convert it into a noun in Spanish that ends in cion. In this case, I've chosen the word education. So we changed the T to C, we put an accent over the O, and now it's a Spanish word. Remember, when we pronounce it, we really want to focus on the vowels. So it'll be educación. Here's the important part. If the new word you created in Spanish ends in acion, then you know you can make it into a verb. If it doesn't, then you can't. Now, our example word, educación, ends in acion, so I know I can make it a verb. The first step is to drop the cion ending. The next step is to add the letter R to the end of the word. In this case, it becomes educar. And you know what that means? Yep, it's really that easy. We just converted an English noun, education, into a Spanish noun, educación, and then made that one a verb, educar, which means to educate. Let's do another one. We're going to do this one a little bit faster. I've chosen the word elaboration. The first thing we want to do is make it Spanish. We change the T to C and we put an accent over the O. The noun then becomes elaboración. Now, the most important thing is to look at the end of the word. If it ends in acion, I can make it a verb. This one does. So we drop the cion and just add an R. The verb we created is elaborar, which means to elaborate. See how easy this is? When I show students this particular trick, a lot of them try to jump right from the English noun ending in tion right to a verb. And they start coming up with things that aren't exactly Spanish. Until you get good at this, you need to go through all the steps. Let me give you an example why. Take a look at the noun speculation in English. We can make this into Spanish. We can change the T to a C and put an accent over the O. But it begins with the letter S followed by a consonant, which means we have to put an E in front. The noun becomes especulación. That's pretty easy. We look at the end of it. Does it end in acion? Yes. So we know we can make it a verb by dropping cion and adding R. The verb is especular, to speculate. Now, beginning students who try to jump right from the English straight to the Spanish verb usually forget to make those changes to the root, in this case, the extra E at the beginning. Avoid that temptation until you get really good at these cognate tricks. Remember, you can only make the Spanish noun a verb if it ends in acion. Take a look at the 3 examples on the board. They don't, so we cannot make these verbs. All right, it's your turn now. Take out a piece of paper. I put 4 English words ending in tion on the board. What I want you to do is make them Spanish. Not Spanish verbs, but Spanish nouns. Go ahead and stop the video while you do that. Let's see how you did. Compare what you wrote to what's on the board. Take a look at the last one, clasificación. Did you remember to eliminate that first S? Now I want you to turn these 4 Spanish nouns into Spanish verbs. First of all, look at them carefully and make sure you can actually make every one of them a verb. Stop the video now while you write your answers out. All right, here are our answers. The first one is examinar, to examine, followed by reservar, to reserve, conversar, to converse, and the last one, clasificar, which means to classify. How'd you do? Congratulations, you just added over 150 Spanish verbs to your vocabulary without having had to sit down and memorize any of them. We're not quite done for the day yet. I want to cover a couple more pronunciation tips that I didn't cover in the first two lessons. I figured I'd just save this boring stuff for the end of the video. The first one is the double L. Now, when you see a single L in a word in Spanish, it's going to sound just like L does in English. But when you see two of them together, it's going to sound like a Y. Now, you may have heard somebody ask, ¿Cómo te llamas?, which means, what's your name? Even though that has a Y sound in llamas, it's spelled with two L's. The last one for the day is the ñ, and that's the N with the little squiggle over it. Spanish does have a regular N too. This one is pronounced like the first N in the word onion. Here's an example of both the ñ and the N in the same word. Mañana. Hear the difference? You've really learned a lot today. Just keep in mind that all the verbs you created are the infinitive form, which means they're unchanged. In English, that would be like to run, to walk. You're still going to have to do something with them to make sentences. We're going to start doing that in the very next lesson. Hasta luego.